Police are struggling to restore order in Mongkok tonight after an angry mob took over a major road junction occupied by pro-democracy protesters, outnumbering them and turning violent.
Protest leaders are blaming criminal elements and pro-Beijing forces for inciting trouble, but the Occupy Central campaign appears to be losing public support.
Protesters have also been condemned for blocking ambulances and relief supply trucks at government headquarters, prompting the chief executive to warn that anarchy would not be tolerated much longer.
Protesters remained camped outside the chief executive's office at Tamar this morning, not satisfied by Leung Chun-ying's 11th hour agreement last night to allow talks between his number 2 Carrie Lam and students protesters on the crisis. The mood was tense as they sweated in the sweltering heat and got soaked by frequent downpours.
Because you see, people are less one day by one day, and it's only have few people are here. And I think at last it will only have a few people and a lot of police here, and at last it will no results.
I think it's out of the question because the Hong Kong people would like to see his explanation for the police violence, and also whether he would resign or give a more correct report to Beijing.
There was a confrontation early this morning as demonstrators refused to let police bring in 2 trucks carrying food, water and medical supplies for officers. Protesters were suspicious after police brought in crates of riot gear, including tear gas and rubber bullets yesterday.
The vehicles contain breakfast and water for the police officers working here. There is no equipment on the vehicle.
Some 3,000 civil servants heading to work found their way barred by protesters. Some were transferred to backup offices elsewhere, but subcontracted staff had to take a no-pay day off. There was more drama at the scene.
Can I have you quiet at the moment, please? We have had one of our officers collapse. He is now coming onto an ambulance which will be brought out here. He needs to go to hospital. I am now asking you to move off the road, please, to facilitate this officer leaving here so he can go to hospital.
The ambulance was finally able to take the officer to hospital after police using riot shields cleared a pathway through the protesters. In the heat and the rain, exhaustion, confusion, and frustration can lead to frayed tempers and sudden flare-ups. Nobody's in charge of these protesters anymore. And with no unified strategy, this means nobody can get them off the streets, and there's no telling how long this crisis will continue. After refusing to resign last night, Leung Chun-ying today condemned those who were causing anarchy. He described protesters besieging his office as radical activists who had no affiliation with Occupy Central and allied groups. He said there were no immediate plans to clear them out, but the government would not tolerate them indefinitely. In Mongkok, the situation became serious as a group of angry men claiming to be citizens upset by the blockade began tearing down protest shelters at the junction of Argyle Street and Nathan Road. The scuffles and arguments continued late into the afternoon, with police struggling to restore order. By early this evening, it was total chaos out there, with protesters finding themselves vastly outnumbered and surrounded by an angry crowd demanding they get out. Many among the crowd were local residents and business operators fed up with the noise and disruption. But leaders of the protest movement blamed the violence on criminal elements, insisting that demonstrators had remained peaceful. They suggested it was sabotage by pro-Beijing forces and advised protesters to gather at the main rallying point in Admiralty instead. Winna Wong, ATV News.
A major showdown at the chief executive's office was averted last night as student protesters were on the verge of clashing with police ahead of the deadline for Leung Chun-ying to step down.
Cooler heads prevailed after 2 university chiefs appeared at the scene to appeal for calm, and Leung agreed to let his number 2 meet student leaders for talks on democratic reform.
A police crackdown seemed inevitable last night as scores of protesters, most of them students, converged on Long Wall Road and Tim Hwa Avenue to besiege the chief executive's office at Tamar. They ignored repeated warnings to stop blocking traffic and disperse, threatening to start occupying government buildings if Leung Chun-ying did not resign by the midnight deadline they had given him. They were prepared to face tear gas and pepper spray after seeing police stockpile riot gear and weapons in the building to tackle them. The situation looked grim until the heads of Hong Kong and Chinese universities made a surprise visit at around 11 p.m., appealing directly to the students for calm.
You've been calm in the last few days, you've been tidy, you've been tidying up rubbish, and you have a lot of goodwill. Please don't waste it by provoking conflict, because everything that you've achieved so far could be lost. So please, 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 put safety first, take care of yourself and each other, don't provoke any conflict, and wait a little bit longer because we understand there's a press conference going to be happening quite soon, and we're all interested to find out what the press conference says.
Less than half an hour before the midnight deadline, a grim-faced chief executive and his number 2 faced the media to make an announcement.
About 2 to 3 hours ago tonight, the Hong Kong Federation of Students issued an open letter asking for a meeting with the Chief Secretary representing the Hong Kong government to discuss one item, and this is the constitutional development of Hong Kong. We have studied the letter in detail, and I'm now appointing the Chief Secretary to represent Hong Kong government to meet with representatives of the Hong Kong Federation of Students to discuss constitutional development matters.
But Leung made it clear he would not step down, insisting that his work on political reform was not finished yet. He also stressed that the talks would have to be conducted under the restrictive framework imposed by Beijing, both key demands that the students dropped when they suggested the talks. Many protesters were angered by what they saw as an aggressive and sullen attitude on Leung's part.
I think he's quite arrogant actually, because he's just implying that I won't talk to you directly, just talk to my staff or something like that.
He has his reason that he cannot resign, but I think that he should also take the responsibility that he needs to think about how to care about our feelings and what we want.
Some protesters took it a step further and started blocking traffic on Long Wall Road, a main thoroughfare for east-west traffic on Hong Kong Island, following the closure of Connaught Road Central.
I think this is the part of stepping up the action because the HKFS promised to stepping up the action before, and now the chief, the CY still did not resign, and that's why we are disappointed with its action. So we come out to occupy the road.
This way is where CY goes to work. This is his office, and then we occupy here to block the passage and hope that CY will compromise.
Police negotiators repeatedly asked them to go back onto the pavement, with some protesters joining in the persuading efforts. About a dozen people remained defiant, but traffic resumed after about an hour.
There were chaotic scenes throughout the day at protest zones across the city, as members of the public scuffled and argued with demonstrators blocking their way.
Many people are losing their patience with protesters disrupting their daily lives. ATV's Ann Zhang reports.
At around 9 this morning, dozens of protesters barricaded the footbridge from Admiralty Centre to Tamar, blocking entry to government headquarters for civil servants heading to work. Many were upset. This elderly woman who works as a cleaner berated protesters at the picket line, complaining that she had mouths to feed at home. This man who works in security at the government compound said the protest was affecting people's livelihood, especially those employed by subcontractors who need to show up for work to get paid. He was so angry that he forced his way through the barricades. But while many civil servants complained about the inconvenience, others said they were able to get into the compound unhindered and questioned the government's motive in shutting down its headquarters for the day. Protesters insisted they were doing the right thing. This demonstrator said their action had directly affected the functioning of the government and would force it to respond to their demands. Across the city today, there were confrontations at protest zones as ordinary citizens going about their business were upset by the blockades. In Causeway Bay, outside the Sogo department store, this woman complained that she had to stay at home to tutor and care for her child because schools were forced to close.
I have to take care of her every day. I cannot go to work. This is the disturbance to my daily life. I only want to back to the normal life, okay?
This delivery man complained that he hadn't worked for a week because of the blockades and had lost 60% of his income. He found some support among bystanders as he challenged protesters to fight for democracy the proper way. Does it make sense that a pregnant woman has to walk to work? Another man asked. You can occupy, but go occupy Li Ka-shing's house or those of Sun Hong Kai. Even though he was reduced to tears by the public scolding, a protester stood his ground and continued to chant for universal suffrage. During another confrontation, one man yelled at protesters that he would stop supporting them because of their behavior. In Mongkok, an altercation between protesters and the public looked like a squabble among children as one man and his companions took it upon themselves to remove sandbags blocking their way at the junction of Argyle and Sai Yung Choi streets. There was a back-and-forth battle for a while as protesters put the sandbags back, only to have them removed again. They eventually sat down on the sandbags to keep them in place. Ann Chang, ATV News.